Hello, everybody who's joining us. Welcome to our webinar today. Happy to have you here. My name's Michelle with part of the TribalHub team, and we are here with Arctic IT and Kimi with BakerHostetler. So happy to have them on the call today. While you guys are joining, if you wouldn't mind letting us know in the chat where you are dialing in from, that would be wonderful. I absolutely love seeing where everybody's calling in from. So love to hear it. I'm actually in my home office in Petoskey today, Petoskey, Michigan. There's Rob in Brimley. Hey, Rob, Alaska. Love it. Northern California, which must be amazingly beautiful this time of year.
Hi, Dawn. And I am here with baby Andrew.
Oh, we're
Wanted
so
to
happy.
introduce officially to the Tribal Hub community our 8-week-old baby. Many of you know I'm on parental leave right now, but
Mhm.
wanted to bring him in before handing him off to my mom, who
Yeah.
generously volunteered to watch him while I do the webinar. But I wanted to make sure we could be here with you guys today. So we're excited.
So happy. I'm so glad you brought him. Yes, he's so cute. He can
Thanks.
stay the entire time. We'll just kind of check him out the whole time. Listen to the
Right.
poos.
But then he's gonna want to eat and he's gonna want
Oh,
to look
God.
around
Yeah, yeah. Oh, goodness.
and
So cute. All right, so we have a lot of people here from a lot of different areas, which I absolutely love. So thank you again, everybody, for being here. And let's go ahead and get started. Thanks again to our webinar presenter today, Arctic IT. Our presenters are Phillip and Kimi, as you can see on the call. This session will be recorded, and you'll be able to find it on tribalhub.com, and you'll also get an email with the recording tomorrow. So if there's anybody on your team who maybe couldn't make it, feel free to forward that over to them when you get that email. A couple of learning objectives to think about while you're listening to Phillip and Kimi discuss. And please make sure to use that chat box or the Q&A feature to send any questions that you have. We will go ahead and answer those at the end. So please send us your questions. Just a little snippet of what's happening at TribalHub. We have our TribalNet conference coming up in a couple months, month and a half, and then we also have our new certification program that the first class will be in November this year. So if you're interested in that, please head over to tribalhub.com and check it out. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn things over to you, Phillip.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. We are so happy to be presenting today on getting budget ready for 2026. We know it's budget planning season. We want to talk about budgeting as it relates to tribal ITs and strategies for budgeting related to security and AI and policy. And I'm so happy to be presenting with Kimi again. We've done some presentations in the past, so it's good to be presenting alongside you. Just as way of introductions, my name is Phillip Jackson. I'm with Arctic IT. I'm the Chief Information Officer here. I oversee our technology, our innovation, our managed service, and our security here. So happy to be with you. And Arctic IT does cloud managed security and ERP and tribal enrollment. So all in the Microsoft stack. Kimi, you want to introduce yourself and your firm?
So, hi everyone. Kimmy Gordy from BakerHostetler, now baby Andrew Free. I am a privacy and cybersecurity lawyer that specializes in working with clients in Indian country. So whether it's gaming, hospitality, healthcare, government side, we work with clients in that space to help develop, privacy and cybersecurity policies, legislation, and then respond to incidents, help with business continuity. Basically anything in the privacy cybersecurity space that intersects with tribal.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about today's agenda. We're going to start with some interactive elements. Want to do a little bit of a live poll, kind of identifying some of your budget challenges. We'll do a reality check and kind of ask you a question about your tribal leadership. Want to talk a little bit about AI. Seems to be in the news everywhere we turn these days. So talk about AI in tribal IT, where to start, what some pitfalls are. Important policies, policy toolkits, all of that, and security tools. And then how do we kind of really put this into action? Some risk translation workshops and Q&A. Kimmy and I like to keep it interactive, so be sure and put anything in the chat, as well as we'll have a Q&A, but not a lot of slides here, just some guidance as we have talk about these kinds of things. So we'll start with a live poll. I think Michelle has that, but let me kind of read it to you. What is your biggest challenge in getting IT budget approved? Is it that leadership doesn't understand the technology? Is it difficulty in demonstrating the return on investment? Is it competing organizational priorities? Or is it lack of urgency due to an absence of past incidents? So curious to get your feedback on that. Kimmy, we talked, I know when we were preparing for this, like it's more of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I know you've had experiences sometimes where my people wish they would have used a little bit more prevention. I know you get involved sometimes when it's maybe too late.
Yeah, that we do see that a lot. And I think, I'm sure as you're looking at this poll, one of the things we discussed in our prep putting on here wasn't all of the above, right? Because we know that it's usually a little bit of everything, but we were really curious to know what you saw as your biggest challenge, because I think your solutions for helping push a budget through can change depending on which way it would be slightly higher.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Look like
That is interesting.
yeah, so seems like most people have a lot of competing organizational priorities, and
Yeah.
I think we'll talk a little bit through that here in a minute. So thank you.
Yeah, I actually would have put some of those in different spaces in my own head from what I've heard. So that is, I'm really glad we did that. That's interesting.
Yeah. And then just kind of another kind of interactive element. This won't be shared, but just kind of what's one word describing your tribal leader's current view of IT? What's one word that would describe that? Just another kind of interesting question to see kind of where all of you are at. We'll move right ahead into the AI trap. So, like we just talked about, Kimmy, AI is on the
Everyone loves it.
news
Yep.
everywhere you look today. You see it. And so, me as more of an IT leader, I'm like gung ho, AI all the way. But really, we need to assess the risks versus the benefits. There's a lot of benefits. We see, Microsoft Copilot to off the shelf chat bots. Anytime you try to get support now, seems like it's AI related and it's being adopted everywhere.
It's being pushed as leadership opportunities too. I've seen a couple ads recently for some of the top MBA programs in the country are now doing AI certifications where you spend, because I even went through, I'm probably going to get spammed now, but I went through to see like what the program was. I mean, lots of zeros behind the tuition for this like 6-week online course to teach you how to draft prompts. So I think you're going to start seeing, leadership also say, I'm becoming more proficient in this, or we need to do this. And then you as IT leaders are going to have to figure out a way to meet that need and implement it. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing on the back end in the IT side is how do we actually roll this out?
Yeah, how do we roll it out? Like and not all AI tools are created equally. Like, so how do I evaluate like which ones that I want my organization to use? How do I maybe do more than I know as we've adopted in AI? A lot of people just maybe start by writing an email, but it can be so much more than that. So how do you kind of find champions? But I know that these vendors are sometimes it's not clear what they're doing with your data, and I think that's something we have to be really careful of. I remember early days, the organization Samsung was using it and putting in proprietary information related to an AI or a chip that they were making, and then it spit it back out to someone else. So understanding what these vendors are doing with your data is important as well.
And I think also knowing when it's turned on and off. So something we've seen recently is clients are wanting to trial a new tool or software. The tool or software has an AI component that the vendor is super excited to expand and develop. You have your own process to vet any AI tools that come into your environment. But when you do the trial, it's automatically enabled and you can't disable it for the trial part. So suddenly you have an AI tool in your environment before you were able to put it through your AI vetting process while you're, trialing that tool. So that's another way that it can kind of sneak in to your environment. And the
Yeah.
other thing, I like our little like planting a flag here, right, for the lawyer space, is that to have kind of the most productive process, honestly, you should have legal and IT reviewing contracts in tandem. And, nobody likes lawyers. We all just try to stop everybody's fun all the time. But if you can actually include your lawyer or your outside counsel on the meeting with the vendor to go over the contract and learn about it and then take it back and review, you are going to, I promise you, have an accelerated review process, because the lawyer is going to hear them talk about the technology. They're not just going to try and find it where it's buried or look for an addendum that maybe shouldn't be there or should be there, depending on how you want to govern your AI. So I think that including everybody from the beginning can actually help streamline, rather than say, okay, well, now it's going to get held up in legal for 3 weeks. So, because you're looking at more than just kind of sovereignty clauses and things like that, you want to look for specific indemnification that speaks to breach obligations, speaks to data usage agreements, data protection, those things, especially, have those be specific to the AI use.
Yeah. And I know we're going to get into policy around this in a bit, but for me, now transcribing a lot of meetings are important for my workflow. So it helps me have the action items and that kind of stuff. It's just a good use case for AI. But I was on with an attorney the other day, and they're like, "Nope, you may not transcribe this," right? So like there's a policy element that is important to this. So I think identifying your champions inside your org so that you can activate AI, because like Kim, you said, I think there's going to be a lot of management kind of hey, how are you using this, and it seems to be really important helping identify those people inside your organization who are going to work with you, but then also working with policy and compliance and legal to make sure that you're doing things in the right way that's protecting your tribe, kind of thing. So there's a hand in hand that really has to happen here, I think. And we'll get into a little bit of that policy here in a minute. Okay, let's move a second to security tools gaps. And I think maybe let's focus here on the flag to start with. What used to be considered advanced is now basic. So, how do we help mitigate some of our risk? Because security is a continuum, right? Meaning that the most secure is just not connected to the internet at all, but that's not very practical kinds of ways. So, what kinds of things do we have in our toolbox that we need to be thinking about for the budget season, maybe if we don't have them today, that are basic? And then what are some nice to haves? Maybe if you're already covering the basics, what should you be looking to? So for sure, regular patching and updates, and it doesn't seem to, or always surprises me that still this is a challenge for a lot of organizations, is making sure that they're patched.
And it comes with a cost. And I think that that's something that's important to communicate to leaders and in your budget plan, right? That we all know we need to patch and update, and we need to take care of systems that are end of life. We need to, decommission servers that are no longer secure. But all of that comes with an operational cost, and it comes with an FTE cost, right? So how many full-time employees does it take to actually handle your patching? And so if you can help translate the tech for the bean counters side, right? Like, how are we going to make it so the accountants understand? And I like putting it into how many FTEs does it take to appropriately do this job. And then you can say, well, if we were to invest in this other tool that's going to reduce FTEs and get better service, better coverage. And I also think it's good to help do some benchmarking. So I still have some clients that really struggle with implementing multi-factor authentication, because there is, still a pushback people that have worked there 20 years, 15 years, they don't want to get a code on their phone. They don't want mobile device management, but
Right.
it's so that may not be considered basic. It may be considered advanced in your tribal organization. So I think it's good to do some benchmarking as to what is basic here, but what is actually considered basic in today's security environment. So I would say MFA is an absolute basic. You must require everybody to have it. It's a non-negotiable, either, and many of you have heard me say this, either put MFA on your phone or install LinkedIn on your phone because you need a new job if you won't do it, right? It's that basic. And it can come back and hurt you. And if you need to have some kind of nuggets and tools to be able to say, this is why it's a non-negotiable for us, is you look at the legal risk. And we have right now the very first data breach class action that has been filed against a tribal casino. And in the class action space, we're going to put sovereignty and all the different other arguments aside, but let's say basic non-tribal casino, things that you're going to be able to help get a better settlement or get a better outcome are, did you have the basic security tools in place? You'll also get a better deal on your cyber insurance, which we all know is frankly something you can't live without. So translating what your basic is versus what your advanced is and putting that in terms of our competitors can be very helpful to help make those arguments.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned going back for a second to the patching and updates. It's a conversation I have every day with clients. Is like it's going to take dollars to solve this problem, and it can be FTE dollars or it can be tool dollars, or it can be a combination of those things. But really, it's going to take some dollars to make sure that you have regular patching because it's really about the things that fall out, the outliers. Like it's remediating the things that didn't patch the right way. Like why didn't it patch? And you got to go in and find that. And that's why it takes a lot of effort. Not putting in a solution as part of it, and then having someone follow up and making sure that's is also part of it. And it's just finding the right balance between tools and people. And then
And
I would say,
educating, oh, sorry, Phillip, go ahead.
no, please go ahead.
No, I was following on to what you were saying, that educating people on what patch management actually is, that, like you said, Phillip, it is not just, well, do you have a spreadsheet? Do you track this? It's so much more
Yeah.
complex. And so educating the people who are helping say, yep, you get a approval here, can really help them understand.
Yeah, and I would just echo what Kimmy said. It seems like I say it on every webinar I'm at. Please, please, please enable MFA in your organization. And I know that we've worked with people before. I actually just picked one off my desk. A lot of people don't like something on their phone, and so like you could use a hardware key or something like that. That's still MFA. So in order for me to be an admin in our environment, I have to use that hardware key. Now, again, there's a cost to that, like versus the software things are free. But if you just make the commitment that we're going to do MFA, then you can start to talk about the how and the why, like how I'm going to make that happen. So, and then I think Kimmy, having a strong incident response plan is really important these days. That's become a basic of like what you're going to do, and are you practicing that annually to make sure you know what happened if something
And
were
it's
to.
like Ghostbusters. It's kind of a who are you going to call? Because
Yeah.
your incident response plan definitely should not be um, IT directions on how to reboot a server. It needs to
Right.
be, what does our marketing team do? What do our finance people do? How do we activate our insurance? How do we engage with forensics and restoration? Because you need that team approach when something is really serious. So having a broader IRP that speaks to non-tech people is going to pay dividends in the event of an incident, but also it helps give the non-IT folks some ownership and responsibility, and then they're more likely to appreciate what you are doing as IT professionals.
I was talking with a tribe the other day, and I was saying, well, sometimes working through a tabletop with your tribal leadership helps them understand these other components, and like you said, have ownership in this. So So I think it's really important. If you don't have one, maybe it's something you should be budgeting for. And then, like Kimmy said, it helps everybody have buy-in into what goes on. And I know at least for a lot of ones we create, Kimmy, the first step is call your attorney, like let them
Yeah.
know that
We
you've
can
had
help you.
something.
We can help get you help within an hour, right? And that's the goal. This is not a ghost you want to fight on your own for several days.
Yeah, exactly. And then we all know that the human element, we're tired and we're managing lots of different priorities. We saw in the poll, we are managing lots of different organizational priorities, but just making sure our staff is trained, I think, is really important. So putting together a training program, I know, again, for us internally, we train people once a month. It's so important. We're an IT services firm, so we do security training once a month and then follow up and make sure people are actually doing it. So it's important. What about some of the nice to haves here? I know that a SIEM is great for consolidating those security events. Pen testing, depending on what you have, kind of external managed detection and response. So like a 24/7.
And I have some feels about the MDR because
Okay.
I've experienced so many clients that um, felt that they had an EDR tool in place and they had people watching it. But unless you have a dedicated SOC, it's very hard to say, or you have FTEs around the clock that this is all they do.
Yeah.
It's very hard to actually have it meet its full potential and protect you. And so
Yeah.
there's a cost with it. And a lot of times we see government budgets separate from the casino budget, right? But sometimes you can leverage um, economies of scale, have everybody on the same MDR, have the same SOC monitoring it. But I think as we're moving and we're looking at like wake up calls for 2026, even past this year, I think MDR is going to very soon transition into a non-negotiable, especially with how well AI is going to be able to circumvent things. We expect it to be able to circumvent and avoid detection. We already see threat actors using tools you already have, so it's that second set of eyes. Especially if you have a smaller IT staff that's maybe got two IS people on there. Um, it's just not possible for you to watch everything 24/7.
That's correct. Yeah. And what that means, I think, like you said, you start to have to tease out what these vendors really mean by MDR. And then kind
Yes.
of implementing a full zero trust architecture. Some of the architecture of the past doesn't work with kind of a mobile workforce or remote workforce, and just thinking about what you want to do to kind of implement zero trust for your org. All right, so let's dive in a little bit further. Let's talk about AI and tribal IT. So capabilities and current limitations. We consult with a lot of groups, and they're just like, where do I start? Where do I start with this IT? And I think really starting is maybe putting together a team or committee of people who are curious, but then Kimmy, you said let's get legal involved from the start of that.
I know it's like womp womp. We've got the lawyers.
No, no,
But if you
no,
get
no.
lawyers who actually are interested, you can make it go faster and further.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, because for every organization, how they're going to use AI is unique to them, and so there's not a one size fits all, or there's not always, this is exactly how you should implement it. As we kind of start to meet with organizations about this, they have, what's their goals? Is it more automation? Are they looking to, save time? Or sometimes AI can just produce better outputs in the same amount of time. So maybe I spend an hour on it all by myself, or I spend an hour with my AI coworker here, and I can get better outcomes as a result. So, understanding what your goals are around AI is super important.
And I think
Um,
understanding the capabilities of AI too, because it is still a very much show your work, check your work
yeah,
situation. You cannot rely on it without having your eyes or an expert's eyes. And I'll go even a little bit further and say that when I have seen we have Copilot in our environment. So
Mhm.
if I see somebody use, or I want to say that, okay, we've got this really nice thing, I need it condensed into bullet points, it's going to spit out some beautiful summary points. But if you don't really know the subject matter, you may not realize that you've lost some nuance and you're not saying exactly the same thing you thought you were saying. And the same thing goes for using it in an HR setting, using it for data flow. So you always want to make sure that you're rolling it out first to your SMEs at your organization who can help check it and watch its usefulness and then help train people. It's not something you're brand new to a role and now you're going to try to fully automate it using an AI tool. Still needs that background.
Yeah, so even as we are learning ourselves internally, we really use this term human in the loop now. And that means like that you're checking it as it goes. So what checkpoints can I have rather than I just want to dump the problem into the top of the Rube Goldberg machine and like spit out all the answers? No, like let's break it down into smaller parts and let's check it as it goes to make sure things are going well. I think there was a time we thought that AI would be checking our work. And I think it's kind of getting flipped on its head a little bit is like we need to be checking AI's work as it goes. It can help, it can be a great coworker or assistant to us, but like to your point, it's really important that you're checking it as it goes. And
And
it, we
I
all
think
know about,
including the biases, right? If you're
yeah,
using it in an HR setting, which is where I've seen a lot of my clients try to start implementing it for hiring decisions and reviewing resumes. And I'm sure you're kind of reading and seeing this in the news as well. But some of these tools, right, they are looking at the data, the salaries, the hiring practices that have inherent biases in them in many ways because they are the biases that we have brought in to train the models. So always double checking that, especially if you have special criteria because of certain contracting or you have a native preference or something like that. Make sure that you're kind of running behind it and your goals are actually getting achieved.
yeah. And kind of with that, like talk to me a little bit about what you would look for like around governance and understanding a vendor. There's the big vendors like Microsoft, like you said, you have Copilot in your organization. We can kind of hope that Microsoft's put a little bit of protections for the client in there as it relates to Copilot. But maybe what if it's a startup with two people,
Yeah.
kind
That is huge. So I have a client of mine that just started using a new tool in their environment that several other similarly situated organizations are using. It is a startup. They were like, well, if these other XYZs are using it, we assumed it was fine. Um, but there was a lot to be desired in the agreement. And one of the reasons that the startup was being so generous in negotiating contracts is because they didn't really have a lot of this stuff in place. So when they were making promises and saying they were doing stuff, there's not a lot of infrastructure built yet. So you really want to be careful when you do work with a startup. And at some point, I mean, I think you can't avoid it. Sometimes they come up with the coolest tools, but you can look at it safely. You can even work to do kind of a sandbox test case and test the bounds of it and put it through its paces to really see if you feel secure. And and the other thing I always caution from a legal perspective is, you know if they're using your data to train their models, know
of,
where, if anything, are they taking your data out, exporting it, storing it? How are they using it once you're entering it into the model? What types of limitations of liability do they have? Will they cover costs associated with any other type of breach? Does that include even a contractual breach in a data protection agreement you may have as part of the data that you're putting into the model? So there's lots of different layers to this that you want to think about. And also from a sovereignty perspective, I'm always very cautious of anybody who's like, well, if somebody puts your data into Chat GPT, you're going to just lose your sovereignty because, sovereignty is not conferred by having, your data in a specific location, right? That it's different. It's part of being a tribal nation. But your data ownership is very different. So you're going to own your data. Just because it goes somewhere else doesn't mean you're going to lose your sovereignty, but you definitely are arguably losing control of your data. So I think defining your terms of this is how we as an organization or a tribe define data ownership, data processing, what we put in our data use agreements, and then mapping it out and letting legal or whomever is making those decisions to say, yep, buy this, actually see that data flow map and understand where it goes.
Yeah, great comments. So I mean, as we think about budgeting, you want to think about what tools you want, and then making sure you have some governance around those tools. Like, how am I going to roll out AI? What tools am I going to use? Am I going to use Copilot? Am I going to use ChatGPT? Am I going to use Google Gemini? Am I going to do trial some of these? And if I'm going to trial a lot of them, like, what governance am I going to have around? How am I going to tell people to use it? So think about what tools are out there, what the costs are, and then making sure you're putting good governance and having the right people review the agreements. And then, Kimmy, you mentioned this earlier, but we sure are seeing an uptick related to AI and criminal activity as it relates to them understanding your organization better. So, like knowing who reports to who and making emails look all the more real. And even things like voice cloning is
Yes, it
becoming a
helps with
thing.
social engineering. My team has seen, because I'm still on, even though I'm on parental leave, I still kind of see sometimes what's coming in, right? And we have seen some very sophisticated organizations fall for voice cloning scams or IT. It's this IT help desk scam that is happening now, and sometimes it is an AI generated voice pretending to be IT because that's going to then mask any type of accent or language barrier issue that you have. And we are seeing it at some very sophisticated organizations. So I just cannot impress enough that having social engineering training and including that in your pen testing is one of the best things you can do to mitigate bad actors' use of AI.
Yeah. And then be thinking about what security AI tools, right? Like if the bad actors are using AI, I think Amazon is seeing something like a sevenfold increase in the number of attacks just since AI is going to come on the scene. So with all that increased velocity, you're going to have tools to help you as well. So let's talk a little bit about policies. I think having a good set of policies, and if you have not developed some of these policies in the org, maybe budgeting for them in 2026, 2027 is important. So, Kimmy, what are some of the policies that you would say? I know I meet with a lot of tribes, and they're like, we don't have any, like really.
Yeah.
So, where
And I would
would
say
you
be very
start?
careful too about just saying, well, we've got these templates from here and so we put our letterhead on them and now we have these policies. A policy is only worth its weight if it's used and understood. So I think having an acceptable use policy, if you don't have that and you're not a policy heavy organization, go ahead and let's get one and build some AI terms into that as well, because it's all about acceptable use. That is, how are you using our technology and data when you're at work? And it needs to be just as clear as what's expected of you if you are going to be in our gaming environment. What do we expect of you if you are going to drive a company vehicle? It should be no different. Privacy policies are also, I think, a hot topic right now and really very important. I think it's going to play a bigger role as we're seeing kind of the data breach class action dip its toe into the tribal space. But how do you define your data and what legal recourses or laws are you using? So, there's a big risk in putting a canned privacy policy up on your casino's website. Um, are you doing things in there that it says you're not, or vice versa? And saying you're going to copy something from state law, maybe putting more obligations on you than you needed in the first place. So, kind of tailoring that and understanding how you're using it and what the temperature of your tribal nation is. We kind of touched on the importance of an incident response plan. And then when we start getting into third-party vendor access, that's when I think you can really benefit from legal and having a standard data protection or data use agreement in your pocket that has been vetted. It's something you're comfortable with, and you can give that as a starting point and negotiate from there. And everybody knows there's not much you can do to negotiate with some of the bigger fish, like a Microsoft AWS. They're not going to take your agreement and toss theirs out the window, but they're not the only vendors that you work with. And so it's still an opportunity to actually put your vendor through the paces to make sure that you're papering what you're comfortable with.
And then how does that kind of help you mitigate risk if you have something that comes up?
Well, in a couple incidents, we see vendors versus data processors, data owners fighting over, frankly, who is responsible, who is actually going to bear both the financial cost and the public relations cost of an incident. It's good to have that outlined in advance. It absolutely is going to protect you. The other thing that they'll look at on the back end, right, is if you have been very clear and transparent upfront that you're not following XYZ state law and the data that's given to the tribe is owned by the tribe, then if you do have a state regulator come to you, which we do see, if you do have a plaintiff's firm, you're pointing back to the policies. You're not trying to kind of reverse engineer that. So
Yeah, good. Let's move on to security tools. We've talked about some of this a little bit already, but for sure, as we think about budgeting for the next fiscal year, these are things that I know you and I have talked about really are super important as you kind of think about your IT infrastructure. And the number one thing we see still to this day is we have a lot of unsupported operating systems. And couple that with AI, which knows which operating systems aren't being patched because a vendor isn't patching them anymore. It's not a security tool, but it's the number one thing you can do. You've got to, replace unsupported, and I wouldn't just say operating systems, but anything that's not currently being maintained, network infrastructure, any kind of line of business software or something. Those things, AI is going to be able to help a threat actor know, oh, this is in the environment and this is how I could exploit this in this environment. So do you still see a lot of unsupported operating systems and things out there, Kim?
Absolutely. And we're seeing more and more regulators, and it become a request, right? When you're doing a mediation statement for a class action, provide us a list of all your servers and their current status in terms of operating systems. So it's still an issue. And it's a whack-a-mole. You're not going to be able to tackle everything. So these are just some things, we wanted to kind of get your juices turning and help focus on what you see your priorities are for the next year.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's, like I said, there's a lot of competing organizational priorities. There's a lot of IT priorities. And so just kind of boiling it down to some really important things. We talked already about MFA, conditional access. So use those kinds of systems. Please, please, please use MFA. It's just, it's really important. Anytime we see breaches, it's usually a lack of MFA that's being deployed that's causing those problems. And then we employ a lot of SAML-based solutions. So, and the reason that is that now I can use one identity provider. And when I disable that account, they're disabled in every application that's in my organization. So again, for Arctic IT, we don't deploy any application anymore that's not tied into our identity program today. So because we see so often people forgetting to disable different little applications that they had and disable that users. So MFA and SAML or a strong identity system is really important. And then I think we've talked a lot about patch management and vulnerability management. So, what kinds of things are you doing in your org? Again, this is just us trying to help you think about maybe priorities for this next year. And like Kimmy said, you can equate it to either full-time people to do it or tools or a combination of both of those. All right, well, let's get into some translation of risk. So as maybe now you've got some things on your mind that you want to budget for, how do I communicate that in the right way? And so, Kimmy, we talked a little bit about, me as an IT guy, sometimes I get too techie and people's eyes glaze over. So how can I like help communicate things to my tribal decision makers
Yeah.
that makes sense?
I mean, it's a language barrier oftentimes. I mean, that is what it boils down to. And it boils down, also, I think there's a fear component where it's like, oh, I'm not a tech person. Oh, I don't understand that. And, I think a lot about how my daughter learned. She's 4. She never approaches a problem as I'm not a block builder. I'm more of a coloring expert, right? She is just, okay, well, how can I figure this out? And just goes at it and looks at it. And I wish we had that more as we are pigeonholed into roles as adults. So one of the best things you can do is try and break that language barrier. And so something that can be very helpful if you're doing kind of an executive tabletop or a upper leadership tabletop, I like to actually give people defined term sheets up front, or little cheat cards. And it can say, we're going to be using these acronyms. This is what they mean. Here's how they work. And then people kind of know, and they aren't intimidated by lack of understanding of the terminology. So breaking it down, and then always equate it to dollars. And it's real. I mean, my team this year had an $80 million ransom demand in the first quarter. So the costs are real. We've had several nation state attacks this year. The landscape is changing, but it's very expensive. And so when you can actually say, this is what it would cost us, this is why, 1 million in cyber insurance is not sufficient, or this is why we need these tools to compete. If you make your case for it, and it's hard when you are a loss leader, right? Nobody likes to necessarily spend money on prevention, but my team makes statistics every year. I know Phil's team's probably got statistics. So the more you can pull in and use your contacts and experts to help put together a numbers case, it's going to help.
Yeah. And then I just had this thought because we've been talking about AI and about making concepts accessible. You talked about that's a language barrier, but this is something that you as an IT person or someone in your organization trying to communicate IT concepts, AI is really good at like explain
Yeah.
this to me like I'm a kindergartner or whatever, make it fun or interesting or make an analogy of this because analogies and those kind of things help convey technical concepts into something that we know today. So it's really important, like you said, that you're not talking a language that your tribal decision makers don't understand because how can they make an informed decision if they don't understand? And then real world examples, at the risk, like you said, you had your team had a $80 million ransomware event, but how do we kind of give some real world examples of things that are going on that, if this, then that, or here's what other organizations you can connect with your network, connect with people here at TribalHub, and like, here's what other people are doing. We need to be kind of on par with that.
And never assume that somebody's not having a problem just because you don't hear about it. Um, a lot of times, organizations are very quiet about how they're handling an incident. So it helps to, you can always pick my brain. You can pick Philip's brain about what
Yeah,
are you
absolutely.
really seeing. I mean, I think if I would share, one of the biggest issues we still see with tribal clients is delay, right? Delay in actually getting help, delay in getting contracts in place with the organizations that are going to provide help, or it's not uncommon for the tribal government to say, well, we assume the IT is handling it. 4 weeks later, we've got a clinic that's still down and can't use their EMR. My team gets brought in, and this is a specific incident from the last year. We were able to get their EMR access it wasn't impacted by the incident, but we knew people at the health system that they got their instance from, right? We were able to make some calls, provide some assurances, get them back up. So there's always going to be little things you may not know about. So don't assume no one's having a problem just because you're not hearing it.
Good call out. Let's talk about steps you can take today. We talked about a lot today, but number one is just count your pain points. I'll just go back to the poll we started with. We know there's a lot of competing priorities. We know it feels like there's a million things that you could be focused on, but part of, the job of conveying is like, let me boil it down to these 2 or 3 or 4 things. Like, help prioritize, and these are the really largest pain points that I have in our IT challenges. And then, how much time am I spending on these things? There's so much pain. How much time am I spending on them, or what's the risk? So really start to boil it down. Again, I'll just say sometimes I use AI to help me do this, like help me prioritize these things, and working back and forth. So really try to boil it down to just a few things, or otherwise people, I think, will get overwhelmed by the number of things. Kimmy, what about number 2?
Yeah, I think again, it's something we've hit on throughout today is trying to show how it can impact you and either make you money or cost you money. And so putting this into plain words, I loved your idea, Phillip, of using AI to actually help you do that. I think it's wild the things that AI can actually come up with now. So it's a really good tool. I think it goes for me. I'm kind of jumping ahead to number 4 over here, but they go hand in hand, right? Finding your champion, who at the organization that is in the maybe executive level or a leader in a different department that you can join forces with. They probably have the ears of different people, they have different specialties. And when in doubt, always partner with the lawyers, because lawyers are really great at talking about risk. We live in that space, it's what we do. But it can help you to get a second set of eyes on what you're actually putting forth. So it's not so much saying, we want to buy this new cool fancy tool, here's what it's going to cost. It's, we saw this problem, we thought of addressing it in these ways, here's one solution, but here's the comparatives on cost.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I know when you talked a minute about the EMR system, I think sometimes, a lot of people haven't thought, oh, our computers are down, but don't think beyond that. So, real world impact is that, some people were not maybe able to be serviced in the way that they needed to. It was more than a financial, like dollars impact, but rather the lives of our tribal members could be impacted by some of these things that exist today. And then I like to just, again, in the idea that people's attention span is limited, and their ability to assimilate information. Like, can you boil this down to a one pager? Like, what is my problem? What's the impact of that problem? And then coming with a solution. Like, here's what I think we need to solve that. And then, as Kimmy said, like finding your champion, and maybe just like saying, hey, can I run this by you first? Like a little practice session, because you've thought about it for a long time. And the first time you present it, you don't want to be presenting to, the tribal decision makers.
And it's something you can use your partners for, Phillip. I'm sure you help organizations do this. We certainly do. Actually help you put together your case and arguments for various tools and various things using our own kind of information set and our ability to translate. So I think that that kind of goes into that number 4 bucket of getting that second set of eyes.
Okay, good. Let's, do we have any questions? And then Michelle, can you help kind of moderate? Because I don't think I can see the questions.
Absolutely. So it looks like we do have one question in the chat for Kimmy, and it says, have you advised any business in the banking industry on the ownership of their data? If a business in the banking industry can maintain ownership of their data, how can we as tribal entities mirror this practice?
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful question. I like that. one of my colleagues, actually, their specialty is financial institutions, and it is the data ownership in that space is very well papered. It's legally papered, right, by laws, but it's also in contracts and how it's treated. And so I think one of the ways you can do that is taking that same papering approach, um, having a data protection code at the government level that says this is our data, this is how we treat it, and also building that into your contracts and really being cautious about what you put public facing in a privacy policy. Right? Are you inadvertently saying that you are complying with certain states' laws or giving people data ownership rights by the language you're using, which you think may be a good transparency practice, but ultimately is not protecting you the way you think it is.
Any other
So
questions, Michelle?
that was the only other one that was in our chat. If anybody else has a question, please feel free. We have, about 5-7 more minutes or so to answer anything that someone might have. If not, any other last minute wrap up thoughts, Philip or Kimmy?
Yeah, I mean, I know, Kimmy, before we get going on this, is there anything you'd like to just say? I know there's a lot to cover today, but
Yeah.
really, I think it's trying to boil down these priorities. Hopefully, we got your juices flowing, and then who you can partner with in your tribe.
We
And
had to put a
then,
plug in for TribalNet, which is, as I was just telling everybody before, I will still be on parental leave, so I'm so sad to miss it this year, but it is such a tremendous event to collaborate and brainstorm and speak to peers in this field.
We're gonna miss you this year.
I know it's my first one in a long time to miss. I'm really sad, but also thank
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah.
So
Michelle, maybe you have something that if people need help, how they could reach out to us and get
Yeah.
help.
Yes,
We'll do that.
absolutely. So we have one last poll. Oh, wait, we have another question here. But before I get to the question, yes, if anybody has any questions or concerns, you can reach out using these emails. But if you lose them or can't remember, always get a hold of us here at TribalHub. Happy to connect you to Philip and Kimmy if needed. So contact us at tribalhub.com is the email. The next question we have is, my concern is that a lot of new agentic AI solutions cost is provided after a proof of concept. So it's back to the late 1990s where the solution is custom based and no pricing until after POC. Thoughts on navigating?
Yeah, that's a really hard, so much AI, both the pricing and the consumption models are changing really, really fast. I think a lot of these things are, at least what I see, are kind of custom to each environment. Like I said, each AI solution is like, what's the goals and what are you trying to do, and that kind of thing. I think most providers would, I know we would have some bounds, like, okay, it will be between this and this. So I think, putting a bound or some limits on that of getting a POC. I think if some provider wants to do something with a limitless, like, for a proof of concept, that's maybe not a great partner to work with,
yeah, you
or
find a different partner.
yeah.
All right, so we have one last poll here before we wrap everything up. But again, just a reminder, if you do need anything, reach out to us. Tomorrow you should be receiving an email that has a copy of this or a video recording, so you can absolutely share it with anybody else on your team. You can also find a copy of it on our TribalHub website probably tomorrow afternoon. So feel free to use any of those and pass it along to anyone who might find it useful.
Well, thanks everybody so much. Kimmy, it was great to present with you again,
Yes,
and
very fun.
have everybody have a great week.
Yes, thanks everybody. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks.